Hi, good afternoon. I'm just so thrilled to see such a full audience. Thank you for coming. I'm going to start right off the bat. Um, okay. This work is a part of my RSVP, or Pondez s'il vous plaît, series, and some of you might know that I was inspired to utilize pantyhose as a medium because I had two children. I just got back from New York, and I was really fascinated with the elasticity of the human body, and not only the elasticity of the body, but also the elasticity of the psyche, and how as a mother that's pregnant, you expand, you expand, you expand, and if you're lucky, if you're really lucky, after you finish, you go back to your regular shape. That's not always the case, but I was just fascinated at the flexibility, of the human spirit, basically. And it wasn't too long into this series that I really wanted to insinuate myself into it some kind of way. And is it possible we could have a little bit darker? Dim the room a little bit. More. I started trying to figure out how I could partner with my sculptures. And I would try a variety of what you might call private performances. But then I started working with fellow artists. This is Maren Hassinger, and you saw her work up there. And she's what I'm calling activating the piece, one of my pieces. And this is kind of a contact sheet, too small really for you to see, but we both kind of got involved with activating the piece. And this was at a show at the Woods Gallery in Los Angeles, and we did it during the opening of the show, and that became kind of a thing that we all did. When we were in group shows together, particularly, we would kind of get together and do performances. And some of you might have seen the video of Barbara McCullough, but this is a piece I did under the freeway in Los Angeles. And I chose that area because it had an energy of kind of like Africa to me. And so these are still pantyhose, and one represented the male spirit and one represented the female spirit. And the long hanging ones, because there was so much wind there, they would kind of sway around the columns. And I called it Ceremony for Freeway Fettes because it was, the opening of the show. And so that's David Hammonds in the dark, costume, and myself in the light costume, which was basically a paper tarp. And so with this performance, it really brought together two things: my love of African culture and my love of Japanese culture. And I really wanted to figure out how are they the same even though they look different? And there was a great tradition of ritual and kind of total art, dance, music, and so on. So around that time, David had a studio, and it was on 54th, around 54th and Slauson, and it was an old dance studio that was kind of like you might see in a movie, like 1940s USO kind of thing. And so we all kind of met there and did a lot of collaborating. The music you heard in the beginning, the Chicago Art Ensemble, was a group that we really loved, along with Sun Ra. And so we invited them to come to the studio. They did a performance in the studio, and this is Marin Hassinger. And so I did all of the costuming and so on, and movement, and it was, even though I came up with the idea, it was really a collaborative situation. This is Franklin Parker. He was also a part of that. This is Rojo. And this is kind of the group Studio Z, and we all kind of hung around, David's studio. And for instance, Rojo had a storefront at the bottom. So there was this, all of these are artists, but with the performance, we were able to, like all performance art, we were able to enrich our own individual practices by working together and maybe doing some other stuff that is of interest to us, but not our main thing, like music or dance, that wouldn't kind of go in the normal commercial realm, but it worked with us. And Barbara McCullough was here the other day, and she was very important to us because she was a filmmaker, and she documented a lot of the stuff that we did. And if it wasn't for her and a few other people, with performance, it's like a tree falling in the forest. If there's somebody there, great. If not, then it doesn't exist. So this is a performance I did. There was a Catholic school on a street that was in our neighborhood, Arlington Avenue. And one day I passed it, and they were tearing it down. I went, oh my God, they can't do this. It's been here forever. So I called Barbara. I said, Barbara, come on. We have to do this. And so she says, she was at home. So she said, okay. And that was the energy of it. We would call each other. If something was happening, we'd go for it in the moment. So I put a costume over my head, did some movement in there. And as I was doing that, and as she was photographing it, they were literally tearing down the building right behind us with bulldozers. But we caught the moment, we had our special moment, so that was what counted. And again with Barbara, this is Cheryl Banks. She was a dancer with Sun Ra. And so we all worked together with, at this particular thing, it was Roberto Miranda, who's a bassist, who played with Horace Tapscott. So there was this connection between the music community and the artist community. And this is a piece I did in the early 80s, and it's called Nookie Nookie, Cross 118th Street. And the reason it's called that is because when I lived in New York, everything was kind of on edge. Everything, you weren't quite sure it would work, whatever it was, life or anything else, but it seemed to work. So I took all of these slats and I just laid them on top, and I would sweat every night during that whole exhibit because actually I kind of wanted somebody to brush against it, and if they brushed against it, it would completely collapse. But the energy of a certain lifestyle is you kind of have to know that it won't collapse even though there's a potential there. So that was the energy of it. It was a performance piece that very few people knew was a performance piece unless, they had the misfortune to, nudge it. Now you can see what happened with, these are the slats. So what we would do when we got together is we would take each other's materials and pull them into another kind of experience. And each of us, when we did a performance, each of us would kind of have a concept that the others would follow through on. And I wanted to read this to you. You might not have heard a lot of the music when you came in. It was pretty soft. But this is a quote through Ralph Ellison, who wrote The Invisible Man, and it's on jazz. There's a cruel contradiction implicit in the art form itself, for true jazz is an art of individual assertion within and against the groove. Each true jazz moment, as distinct from the uninspired commercial performance, springs from a contest in which each artist challenges all the rest. Each solo flight or improvisation represents, like the successive canvases of a painter, a definition of his identity as individual, as a member of the collective, and as a link in the chain of tradition. Thus, because jazz finds its very life in an endless improvisation upon traditional materials, the jazz man must lose his identity even as he finds it. And we were losing our identity as a collective, yet finding our identity as individuals. So this is called Flying, and it was a performance at the opening of April Kingsley's Afro-American Abstractions. Okay. So this was on the side of a building in Los Angeles, Barnstall. We were climbing, that's Marin and myself, climbing the wall and jumping off into space. And so all of us would get together, not all of us, but different segments of our collective would get together and just go around town and just try things out. This was at the Los Feliz area in Los Angeles. And you can see, each one of us tried something, but Marin is in the white shirt. Houston Conwell is next to me, and I'm there with my little pantyhose and, putting it on a stick and playing around, and Frank Parker is over there. So we just, played. We went into the Greek theater when nobody was in there and used the stage, and, we just wanted to explore, and through the exploration really find new ground, as they were talking about in this jazz definition. And you can see Houston over there all the way on his back, bending completely on his back. And this is, again, another performance where this one was mine, called Get Up. And my concept was that it was taking found objects and using them, having the dancer, which is Marin here, exploring the material and also becoming the sculpture in themselves. And this is Yolanda Vidado. And again, Houston had his concept he pulled out. Parker had his, Marin had hers. Now, this is Marin and myself at a performance, and this is actually a concept that was put forth by Ulysses Jenkins. Ulysses Jenkins is the video artist that you saw upstairs, and with these performances, as you know, it allows artists to really stimulate another part of themselves. And Ulysses, besides video, is very much into music. He has a band and he does a lot of work with musicians. So this particular concept was, and that's me on the end, was the fact that my birthday is on September 18th. His birthday is on September 19th. So he started on September 19th. We all did. We stayed in one space, which was Rachel Rosenthal's space, who was the mother of performance in Los Angeles. And we stayed there for 24 hours. And people, came and went, performing artists or visual artist, and people would do stuff during the day, but we were there for a straight 24 hours, and it was a very special experience. We did kind of ritual things as well there. And this is Ulysses without your interpretation. This was another thing. This was like in 1980-ish. And the thing that was happening then was it wasn't just a black thing. We were all, that's May Sun on the end. We were connected with the Latino community, Asian American community, and we all kind of worked together because they didn't want to talk to us in the museum. So hey, that's fine with us. We were evolving and doing our own thing within the collective that we were creating. And this is an inch. Okay. And along with Chicago Art Ensemble, we were very involved with Sun Ra and his vision, and he was quite the trickster. I don't know if any of you, are any of you familiar with Sun Ra? Yeah. Okay, all right, good.
The music is different here. The vibrations are different. Not like Planet Rave. Planet Rave's sound of guns, anger, frustration. There was no one to talk to from Planet Rave to understand. We set up a colony for black people here. See what they can do on the planet all their own without any white people there. They could drink in the beauty of this planet. It would affect their vibrations. For the better, of course. Another place in the universe, up under different stars. That would be where the alter destiny would come in. Equation-wise, the first thing to do is to consider time as officially ended. We work on the other side of time. We'll bring them here through either isotope teleportation, transmolecularization, or better still, teleport the whole planet here through music.
Wow, that lecture was speed dial, wasn't it? To give you a sense of what that was like before we start a Q&A and that sort of thing, because I think it's important for people as best they can to have the same experience, because you saw on the video kind of how that was working. I think the first thing we need to do, all of us, is to take off our clothes, and then we can talk. So I want you to, the minute I said that, did you feel a different energy in your body? Did your body start talking to you? I really am interested in the body, and you know that whole thing about, they'll put a word up on a screen and you kind of respond to the word or not respond to it. And I think they do it that way, but I think it'd be really interesting if there's a way to monitor that so that whatever level you have with a particular word, it becomes a note. And then that note, a succession of notes, can then be your own personal symphony. So I think it would be a really interesting experiment. But right now, each row, I have a pantyhose. And each row becomes a collective. So there's two people here, there's, and so on and so forth. So you are immediately a collective. Uh-oh, somebody's leaving. Okay. They got the heck out of Dodge real quick. So just know that you all are now connected. And I thought this area would be tighter than it is, but you do have some space up here. So whoever wants to try something up here, you still have to be, in your row. The people that are in their row have to do it as a row, but you can come out to the side or whatever. But what we can do is you can do something like this, but each one of you, and I'm going to give you a card, each one of you have to figure out what to do. If I give you the card dance, then you have to figure out how to dance with it, okay? If I give you another kind of key word, then you have to utilize that word in your exploration with the pantyhose as material. And it'll be different for the guys because I don't think they've quite tried them on yet. But it's a new experience, and it's simply a material that is flexible enough for you. So I'm going to give you one. You can decide. I found this thing over here, which is incredible. I don't know what the heck this thing is, but oh my goodness, what can we do with this? Okay, so, and there's hooks there. So you guys look around the room because that's kind of what we were doing. We took our environment and we investigated it in a new way. So what was normal, a hook for something, became something else. So I'm going to give each row pantyhose. You think about it, talk about it, dance about it. Okay, so each row? Yeah, one per row, I think. Okay, and you too. Okay.
Should we do one at a time? Whatever we want with both words.
Yes, whatever you want with both words. Okay.
Should I pass these down?
Just, you guys get together, stand up, talk amongst yourselves. Singing and dancing. Oh, that's lovely. That piece back there. Is this all the same group? Back there, right behind wrist.
We're stretching together.
Okay. Are there any questions? I just want to say that this particular cane was purchased in Chicago by a folk artist, and his name is King Dog, I think. King Dog, yeah. And of course, and he dated it 1990, and this piece was Raising Cain. Okay. All right. Okay.
Senga, can you talk about how the connection with the collective in LA and the Chicago ensemble happened with Sun Ra?
Well, there are two different groups. Chicago Art Ensemble is different than Sun Ra, but the investigation was kind of the same. Sun Ra is a lot more mischievous, but this investigation of taking jazz to the next level, improvisation to the next level, we were doing it visually, they were doing it with music. We had a kinship, so that's why we had various exchanges with them. Mm-hmm.
One comment, one question. I was here for the dance performance, so it was really fun because that was about engaging the other people that were in the room too. So,
and
the guy covered himself with construction paper and used your the
nylon mesh,
pantyhose and
yes,
everything, and created a costume for himself, and then asked people to participate by holding on to different parts of it. But so, what about feminism and gender issues? And what's happening there?
Oh, you want to be more specific?
Well, I mean, they are pantyhose.
Yes, they are.
You know, they're, you know, it feels to me like, you know, stretching, ripping is
Yes.
not a playful.
No, yeah, I have been labeled a feminist, but when I was doing my investigation, I wasn't labeling myself. But as a woman, you know, it's a thing. I mean, you can't get away from it. And I was dealing with body issues, distorted images of self, as well as the flexibility of the body and the psyche. But it is cut up. And in today's world, it even means more because there's a lot of, continues to be some extreme body issues, as well as, what do they call it? This is terrible. Plastic surgery. And, you know, cutting up your body to make it the perfect body. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're very serious issues. But to get to those serious issues, I also had to explore in a playful way. So it had its place. Yeah.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Did you and Marin have the same objectives? And did you feel any spirituality connected to the work, or any African history connected to the work?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you kind of saw that in, you know, Freeway Fets. That's always there. And like I said, that's why I was exploring both the African and African American, you know, my cultural background, as well as the Japanese culture. And then I expanded that further on, you know, to be Native American culture, Indian culture, East Indian culture, because after this series, I did a lot of sand painting, and in almost a lot of cultures, Native American, Indian, and African, and so on, there's this history of healing. Tibetan is a real good example that everybody knows about. You know, when you do a sand painting, in many cultures, you put the person smack dab in the middle of it. And it acts as, you know, like when you go to the doctor here and they might give you a shot and they have like a red box, and that box is for toxic material. And the same thing is true of sand paintings. You put the person in the middle, somehow, you know, all the toxins are pulled out of that person. And once that's done, then the painting is done. It's done its job. It's collected all these toxins. So there's a connection with spirit, absolutely, with everything that I do. And art is a healing tool.
Just to kind of push that question a little bit further, did your interest in working collectively specifically derive from interest in African culture or other cultures, or was that something that was really of the moment?
It was of the moment. We all had similar interests, but it was a little bit different. For instance, with Marin, she went to Bennington, and she, took dance there. And she's interested in film. So we all had different interests, and some of them crossed over, but we were all tools for each other. That was the main thing. Can you stand on your head while I do this? Okay, that was the spirit of it. Okay, did you have a question?
Oh, I just wanted to ask you if the visual performance aspects of the art ensemble came out of the work with you, or if they were doing that already.
They were doing that already, and it was like, a kind of a common bond. Yeah, they were doing that already, yeah.
You said that the the museums weren't interested in you and your the counterculture or alternate culture, whatever. At what point did they become interested, and how did that happen, and how has that changed your community, if it has?
It was pushed and shoved, and they didn't go quietly into the night. It was pressure, like any other part of our culture, like, integrating the schools or anything else. And it was very difficult because on the surface, just like Hollywood, it's supposed to be, very equal and very, liberal and so on, but that wasn't the case. And when we first started, they would, after the pushing and shoving, they would put us kind of like in special community rooms. And that's the polite name for it. They had another name for it that wasn't so polite, but that's how, and then eventually, in fact, Marin was the first woman, I believe, African-American woman that exhibited at LACMA. And David Hammonds, there were a few exceptions, but it was not pretty. And that was whatever coast you were on, LA, New York. There was a real push by the community to say, we are here and we need to be recognized. But we didn't wait for that. We just kind of did what we wanted to do and and just went at it. And they caught up with us.
But now that they've caught up with you, how has that changed your community? If it has.
I think from the beginning of time, no matter what culture, there have always been collectives that have happened, artists that get together and, are like-minded. But, and I'm sure that's the same today, but there's a real emphasis on career. And a lot of, artists just want that career kind of singularly. And that sense of camaraderie and brotherhood, and so on, has kind of been lost. But there's a man in Chicago, Theaster Gates, and he is working really hard to bring it back and have artists get together with each other and, push the dialogue, the new dialogue.
I was wondering if you felt any connection with Lydia Clark in Brazil and her living pictures.
Yes. She is my idol. I studied her early on, and I was just so happy that there was someone that, kind of was like me, with these kind of materials that aren't permanent and, all that kind of stuff. She was a real role model for me. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could say more about your interest in Japanese culture.
Mm-hmm.
What drew you to it, and whether you felt that was something that was shared with other folks
Yes.
that you were working with?
Yeah, as was mentioned, I spent a year in Japan, and the reason I wanted to go to Japan and study was because I had been exposed to the Gutai group. I don't know if some of you are familiar with Gutai. Students, anybody? Okay. Students that aren't familiar with Gutai, it'd be great if you look them up. Amazing avant-garde performing group, the collective. In fact, MoMA just had an exhibit of their work, as well as another New York museum. Guggenheim, okay. Documenting their work. And so I went there, but I never found them. And so, but I did find, Japanese culture so rich and so stimulating. And again, I'm attracted to the impermanent. And what they did with paper in a permanent way, I mean, it's infinite the way they deal with paper, yet it it can be years and years and years old. So just the spirit of the culture, the way tradition was so solid there. I mean, everywhere you look, it was an art form. Even talking on the phone. And I live with a Japanese family, and my Japanese mother said, "Oh no, you can't go out of the house until you get your manners." So everything, has a special way about it. So yeah, I loved it. Either one.
I showed them her work about 20 years ago when she was first starting out.
Oh wow.
What I'd like to know though, you place a great emphasis on community. In the art world, printmaking is a sense of community. Have you done any prints has that appealed to you?
I've done some prints. When I was in New York, I was able to go to Bob Blackburn's workshop, but I've not done a lot. Yeah, but Maren and I have been friends. Well, all of us have been friends for over 30 years. So we kind of know how each other works and so on. So,
His workshop was a major force.
Yes, it was.
In printmaking in New York.
Yeah.
And the opportunity for minority groups to take advantage of the facilities that were offered.
Absolutely. He was really critical to New York, and he went on and on for years. And I just felt grateful that I could, I was there in a moment where he was still there, and I could take advantage of that. Yeah.
Can I ask you to say more about the relationship between your performance work and the objects you make? It seems like so much of what you talk about is a great interest in materials and impermanence and collectivity and movement. And I guess I wanted to know more about why you make objects and how you feel about objects when they're in a museum.
Well, I've been getting a lot of feedback from people that have seen the exhibit, and it feels really good to know, that they are interacting with the work. And really, that's what I always want, whether it's, RSVP or whatever, is someone to be actively involved in what they see before them or what they see around them, as opposed to, just being an observer. You have to, be alive with it. Okay.
Are you saying we can, interact? I heard wrong.
Right. No, I would love that. I think that's every sculptor's dream, but when you're in a museum, it doesn't happen. You're right. Yeah, and that's the reason I got involved with sculpture, because, I love a sensual experience. So, to be able to touch something and have a tactile experience with it, is great, but it's rare unless the wonderful world of public art, that's the best to me, because so many people don't come into a museum. They just will not, for a variety of reasons. But with public art, murals, sculptures and everything, it's always there for you, always. So if you pass by the same thing 4 years, going to work, coming back, and all of a sudden you pause and you turn around, it's like listening to a piece of music and finally you hear the lyrics and you've just kind of, and then this thing happens, you're with it. You're right there with the work, and it's patient. Public art is patient. It is there for you. So, okay.
I was wondering if you could say a little bit about, because I love this anecdote that you mentioned about Rapunzel with Barbara McCullough, and it seemed to me that maybe you could describe a day in the life of Studio Z, because it was a different sense of time.
It is. Yeah, and again, we were individuals as well as a collective, and one of the artists was Greg Edwards, who was Mel Edwards' brother, because Mel Edwards had already moved to New York. And Mel Edwards was, an idol of mine as well. Going to college, you guys are so lucky. We knew zero. We got zero in our classes about artists of other cultures, outside of the traditional, zero. So we had to educate ourselves about Romare Bearden, the Harlem Renaissance even, basic stuff. We had to search ourselves to find this material and to find our own heritage, because as far as the major culture was concerned, we had none. I mean, so outside of African art, there was not a place to find out about ourselves unless we chose to do it. Okay, so thank you very much.